Hey Carolyn, can you hear me okay? Let's check everything. And how does the video look? Is it a smoother stream than usual? It looks to me like it is, but I have a bit of a delay on my end, as is usual. Audio stream's current bit rate is lower than the kilobytes. Okay. I'm getting a notice that the audio is streaming lower than it should. If it's not one thing, it's another. I'm going to go and check something out. Hold on a second. Sup. Don't talk like a teenager, Kevin. You're a grown man. Okay, well, looks good. Thank you, Mike. Charts? No, not for this one. And I'll tell you everybody in a second why I didn't do that. And go. How's my time? I'll just give everyone another few moments to chime in. And then we'll see how we go. It's a learning curve, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, maybe I'm not supposed to do that on YouTube. I get quashed or something. Who knows? But I got young fashion ways. Fair enough, Kevin. Hello, Sean. I see you there. Welcome. Guitars for vets. Yes, indeed. I do a lot of work with guitars for vets. It's a great organization using music to heal, basically. Done a lot of courses for them, had a few private students from them. I'm glad you're here, buddy. Okay. It seems for now, as I'm looking at everything, that it's reasonably stable. I've been getting messages all day that the audio is streaming at a lower rate than they recommend. And then I get a big nasty message that comes up and tells me I'm in trouble. But so far, so good. And it's telling me my stream health is good. So that's better than day one. And day two looks a little better. So that's good. Video and audio good here in British Columbia. Thanks, Sean. Appreciate the feedback, man. Let's get started, and hopefully some others will chime in. Let's not hold things back. Welcome, everyone. Steve Dempster, Dempster Guitar Studio. Back at you again with yet another live stream. Unscripted and raw, the way I like them. All the errors and boo-boos get fixed over time, and with your patience, this gets better and better as I learn more about the process. But the reason I'm doing these is obviously we're all struggling with this COVID-19 pandemic, and it makes sense right now while we're all at home, in home, to be doing something somewhat productive if we're involved in music, and I thought I would chime in with you guys and send some lesson ideas your way to help you stay focused on the beautiful and creative side of the beauty of life instead of the drama that's unfolding right now. It will pass. It's going to pass, and hopefully all of you will work through it with no health issues involved. So far, so good for me and my family. So we're going to move forward with that. That's why I'm doing this. Now, the other issue, of course, is aside from anything I can try to control here to make this a good experience for you, there's a lot more people on the interwebs right now because of the situation we're in. There's a lot more streaming going on. Servers are getting overloaded, and it's just crazy. So, we're still at the whim of the digital gods. Anything can happen. If worse comes to worse and it all just cracks apart and doesn't do what it's supposed to do, then I will simply inform you of a reschedule, and we'll do that. So we have to be prepared for that possibility. But today we're here because this is today is basically in response to some of the main questions that I was getting, or the main question that I was getting from students on part one, which was 2 days ago. I meant to be on board yesterday for this session, but had a little family emergency. Everything's under control, and had to deal with that first. And I just figured kibosh it for tomorrow, rather for yesterday, and I'll do it today. So that's where we're at. 6-string player from Michigan, USA. Nice to have you on board, man. So in the first session, the whole notion that I wanted to cover was the idea that students were interested a lot in figuring out how people manage to put licks, little licks in between their chords while they're playing, just to give their playing a little bit more pizzazz. And it is fun. It's a nice sound to do that. Doesn't have to be done, of course, but when you're interested in progressing on the guitar, you want to be informed about these kinds of techniques and how people go about doing it. So that's what was covered, and I only did that in the key of C in the first session. And the reason I do mostly everything when I introduce it in the key of C is because it's basically kind of considered the simplest key, because there are no sharps or flats in it. Now, if I'm scaring some of you away with this language, stay with me. I will reiterate some of the same concepts I did in part one, in part two. But if you're really, really stuck on some of the terminology that I'm using, go into my YouTube channel and check out the playlist Where Stuff Comes From. There's a whole series of videos there that walk people through, as a primer almost, this kind of language and these kinds of ideas that you should have already floating around in your mind. But you certainly don't need to have all of that stuff in your mind to be here today, for sure. Joanna's here, yay! Tony Stevens is here. Awesome, brother. He and I talk a lot. He's a great guy. I appreciate y'all being here today. So, y'all, I don't know. That's what I said. That's what I said. Now it's out there. Can't change it. So in today's session, the primary question I was getting, does everything I talk about, or I talked about in the first one, apply to the other keys? In other words, is there an easy transition from the key of C to the key of any other of the 11 keys in our musical system? And there are 12 in total, so if you're not familiar with that, you will be shortly. And the quick answer is yes, of course. I've always said in many of my videos, the beauty of learning this kind of stuff is that once you get it in one key, once you understand the chemistry and the principles and the thought process that's going on in a player's mind, you can reapply the exact same thing in any other key. The only other sticky issue that creeps into the other keys is that once you leave the key of C, some of the notes in the other keys are going to have to be altered, which I'll explain shortly, in order for them to adhere to the major scale sound. And that's where we get some keys that are referred to as flat keys and some keys that are sharp keys. That's what's going on there. So the addition of the flats and the sharps kind of makes you have to think a little harder on the process, but the chemistry is the same. And if you think often enough on the process, you simply just get good at it. And I think this is the sticky issue for a lot of people. They may know of it quite well, which is great. That's the start. But the actual application and usage of it tends to be very minimal. And the reason is quite obvious, I think. It's because the process feels rather slow and daunting and hard on the head. But that's learning, people. You know this. You know deep in your bones that if you really want to get good at something, the exposure to the new information that's going to help you get there is going to make you feel overwhelmed for a period of time. But the overwhelm is just your brain's reaction to this new information. If you hit it often enough, it settles in, it becomes normal, it becomes, this is the term I wanted to use in the first video, it becomes a new mindset for you to understand how this thing works, instead of just seeing things as strings and frets and finger shapes. There's actually a language going on deeper than that if you get it, it sticks. And it can be used across all the other keys. Not unlike learning to ride a bike. If you learn to ride a bike, let's say it's a 10-speed, can't you really ride any other two-wheel bike? It might feel a bit different on other bikes because they're built differently, they're smaller, they're bigger, they have different handlebars, different seats. But essentially the chemistry of it is the same, and you do have to develop a new feel. This is exactly the same process. So there it is, and that's what we want to hit today. I'm going to do 2 more keys. Who knows what will happen? I might even make mistakes. The point isn't not to make mistakes, by the way. A lot of people are very concerned about that. The point is to jump into this sandbox, that's the metaphor I keep using, and get your feet and hands dirty. Start pushing sand around until you can come up with something. Learn eventually. If you add some water, you can stick the sand together and build something different. But basically, nobody tells you how to push the sand around. So once you know how to work with a shovel and a bucket and a pile of sand, you kind of do your own thing with it for a while. You make it your own. And this is what I encourage you guys to do a lot. I'll show you some ideas, some perspectives on the guitar that I think are useful for the very long term, that help you understand any other concept that comes along much more easily. And then you've got to take it away and go into your own guitar sandbox and play with those ideas. Look, it's just not enough that we do this today. You go away saying, "Yep, I got everything Steve said," or maybe you didn't, and that's it. Tomorrow you wake up and you don't apply any of it. You don't sit down to work through some of these ideas. That's simply the missing factor. And I guess they're easy to skip because they're not songs. They're not immediately on the surface musical experiences, which is why people, of course, want to play guitar. But like any craft, there is a skill set that has to be cultivated for that craft to appear to others to be effortless. And that's what we're looking for. Okay. Hey, Jerry. Glad to see you here. Wow, it's a good crowd. Very good. All right. Let's get started. And by the way, if you have a guitar handy, it might be wise for you to try some of this stuff out. I might go through it quicker than you're able to kind of keep up. That actually doesn't matter. Just the fact that I've got your brain having to think on it a little bit and try to figure some stuff out is sufficient. That's a good experience for your brain to have, and it will be very different than if I just said, "Hey, here's a new lick I'd like you to learn today," and then I demonstrate it, and I show you what frets and what fingers, and you can do it, but then you walk away from that experience not really any more informed about, "Hey, Steve, when do I use that lick? Where do I use that lick? What is it that makes it sound so good?" If those kinds of questions come into your mind and you don't have an answer, that's not good. If that question doesn't come into your mind, that's not good. So I'm trying to help you get a new mindset as to how you should think about this, perhaps differently than other people are presenting how the guitar works. Anyway, that's the idea. So that's 15 minutes in. I wanted to give myself 10 minutes to talk about it, but it took a little longer. And by all means, if you have questions along the way, pump them into the chat box. I'll try to answer them. Sometimes I get into a stream of thought, and I'm just going to go, I'll leave that to the end. So you may have to remind me, but we will have a formal Q&A at the tail end. And I don't know how long this will go. I've given myself, an hour and a half or so of time. We'll see what happens. These sessions are for you guys. I don't want to feel like I'm just up here at a podium talking to you. Feel free to chime in. Let me know how things are working out for you as we go by. Bit like playing not good. Bit like my playing not good. Tony, man, you know what? You're too hard on yourself, brother. We're going to fix that for you. Okay, let's get this show going. So, if I said to you, which I said I was going to do two keys, which one? Key of A, key of F, I think. I think that was in the description box. Let's pick one. Let's do the key of A first. Why not? It's more familiar, I think, to people. At least they think it's familiar to them. Just wait a second. You might be surprised how little you know about the key of A. Even though many songs you play, you might know of them being in the key of A, but that might be as far as it goes. Okay, if I said to you today, wherever you guys are at right now, I think Tony might be much later into the evening. If I said, let's do a jam session in the key of A, I always ask students, what does that mean as soon as you hear that? What does it mean to you? Is Is it just a bunch of words that you know come out of musicians' faces? Or does it have real meaning to you in terms of, is there information that's flooding into your brain to help you make sense of the key of A? Okay, that being said, I always say to people, at the very least, excuse me, when you are going to play, jam, improvise, make anything up, I don't care, it doesn't matter, in the key of A, I'm going to suggest that you really want to have the ability to play the A major scale from at least one place on your guitar, and ultimately as time goes by and you get more experience, you'll be able to do this from many locations. That effectively will cover more and more of the fretboard. I remember when I was, 21, 30 hours here, so what's that, 9:30, 10:30? I'm very bad with military time, but I get it. Thank you for being here later in the evening, Tony. Appreciate that. Jerry, 3 sharp. Yeah, right on. That's a good piece of information. Jerry is saying when he thinks of the key of A, what comes to his mind are 3 sharps, F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp. Now, he and I are working together currently as he's an online student of mine, and I know that he's been somewhat trained in some of the theory of how music works, and he's comfortable learning that stuff. So for him, for that to pop into his brain right away is good. But people are going like, well, where does that come from? How does he know that? It's not hard. It's just being avoided. You don't know you're avoiding it, but I'm telling you, you are, sort of. Okay, so let's do this. Key of A, and you need to know the major scale. So let's look down at my fretboard, and I'm looking for an A somewhere at the lower end so that I can play the scale up 1 string. I'm a 1-string guitar player, right? Very specific notes that fit within the key of A. Same idea. I'm going to get there very shortly. Well, here's an A on the 3rd string, 2nd fret. I hope you can hear that. Carolyn told me that everything sounded good, so I'm going to trust that it does. I did test it earlier, so it sounded good then. So here I am with an A. And you can choose any A on your fretboard if you know where they are. But notice I didn't say, let's go to the 3rd string, 2nd fret. That's a very common way to orient people onto the fretboard. Some people will at least say, let's go to the 3rd string, let's go to the G string, 2nd fret. They're at least telling you that the 3rd string is G, which is good. But why don't we just call it what it is? It's an A. It requires memorization. Sorry to tell you. There's no magic trick to it. You have to have gone to it often, and you have to have rehearsed in your mind that when you go there, it's an A. You don't have to be able to read music to know that. It's a visual thing on the fretboard that when you go to that second fret on the 3rd string and you do it enough, and you most certainly do because I know you're all playing A chords all the time, go and isolate that note and keep reminding yourself, that's an A. Okay. I know I do ramble on a little bit, so let's carry on here. You need to now invoke, I love using that word, the major scale interval formula. Now, if that's a scary phrase, it's very simple. It's simply a description of the distances between all the notes that make up the A major scale. For example, the distance from the A note to the B note, from the B note to the C note, etc., all the way through. The distance between notes, musicians call intervals, musical intervals. And so they get to a place in their playing where eventually they memorize these intervals, as well as the notes, of course. And the intervals become actually, interestingly enough, a more valuable tool for in-the-moment playing. Because sometimes you're playing so quickly you can't recall notes. I mean, that's just, you're not doing that. The brain doesn't work that way. You may have a target note in mind that you want to end on or something. But the interval way of thinking becomes kind of more important. But let's leave that aside for the moment. Let's do this formula over one string. Here's how it works. You've got your A note. According to the formula, now this is just because it's memorized in my brain, and hopefully many of you have it memorized in your brain, because you know I push it a lot. The next note that comes into play is some kind of a B note, because the musical alphabet goes A, B, C, D, E, F, G. End of story. We modify some of these notes with sharps and flats, but those are the only letters we work with. That's pretty simple. 7 letters to make all the music you've probably heard all your life, versus 26 letters in your written alphabet. Well, you managed to handle 26 letters, I'm assuming, quite fine. I think you can handle 7 for music. The first interval from the A to the B is what's called a whole tone, or a tone for short. Visually, on the fretboard, that's 2 frets. So there's the B, sitting 2 frets higher in pitch. The sound went up, going from A to B, 2 frets apart. Good. From the B to the next note, which is going to be some kind of a C, we have to go 2 more frets, or another tone, if you will. So if I go 2 frets, if I just see it that way, I hit the correct sound. But when I land on that sound, what I want your brain to start doing as a new operating system that you may not have been applying up to now is remind yourself, okay, I can see the A. You may be quite comfortable with where the B is, because the natural notes tend to be fairly easy to get a handle on. And then you go another tone up from B, and you hit a correct note, but now you need to be able to name the sucker. Okay, well, here's how you do that. You know where B is. I'm assuming you know where B is. Okay. B to the note C, according to our musical alphabet, is not a whole tone apart, but what's called a semitone. And that's only 1 fret away. So here's B. C is right next door, but that's not the note we're on. We're on the next note up from that, up in pitch, that is, up in sound. So we need some kind of a C, and it can't be what we could call the regular C or the natural C. It's not that one. When you take any note in music and you raise it in pitch by 1 fret, you have effectively sharpened that note. So we have taken the C note, did I say that right? And we've moved up 1 fret, it now becomes C sharp. So let's do a big picture now. A to B adheres to the formula, a tone. We need a tone. We also need a tone from B to some kind of a C. And it turns out that the kind of C we need to get is a C sharp. So that tells you that in the key of A, C's are always sharp. Wherever you land on a C, anywhere on your fretboard, if you're in the key of A, you must make it, for our purpose, you must make it a C sharp. Hence, that's why in Jerry's reference, he said there are 3 sharps and one of them is C sharp. He knew that. So, if you have to, Jerry, you can go get a cup of coffee and leave and come back when things get a bit more interesting for you. Okay, A to B, B to C sharp. So that was 2 frets and then 2 more frets. Whole tone, whole tone. In the formula for the major scale, next I don't need a whole tone, I need a semitone. And that's going from C sharp to the next note higher. Well, it's got to be some kind of a D. When you're building scales, in general, almost all the time, there are some exceptions, you cannot have the same letter name repeated twice consecutively. It's a forbidden thing. They often talk that way. It's just not done. So it can't be like C with a double sharp. Could be in some cases, but we're not going to go there right now. It's got to be some kind of a D. Well, it's easy enough to figure out. You already knew where C was. We got C sharp right next door. If you knew where C was, you probably know that D is always a whole tone higher. But that's not the note that we need. B, C, D, C, and then D. What am I doing here? B, C, C sharp. Thank you very much. Now I've got it. Lost my frame of reference. C sharp. So you know that the C sharp must be the note that's sitting in between the C and the D. Now, I'm spending a bit of time on this because people are always asking me that, or telling me rather, that they're just not good at this. It's a different way of thinking. And you may find it a bit laborious enough to say, enough, I'm done, I can't do this. It is a bit hard on the head. It makes the brain go boom, 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 and I get that. But this does not last forever. This is the challenge in the age where people want things right away. You plant the seed, you water it, you give it some TLC, and it grows into a beautiful sunflower to grace your garden. That's not going to happen if you don't invest time and energy into that seed. That's what we're basically talking about here. This is a seed, if you will, of a new way of thinking. Yeah, don't worry about the minor scale, Tony. Just don't even let it enter your mind for now. I know everybody often has their own background of information that whatever I say may connect them to it. Just erase it from your mind for the time being. That just clutters the process. Here's what we've got so far. I know this is a bit laborious, but this will pay off, trust me. A to B, B to C sharp. So those are two tones in a row, then a semitone. That brings me to the note D. After D, I need some kind of an E, and it has to be a whole tone away, according to the formula. So again, I'm referencing the formula a lot. There's a part of me that's assuming you know this interval formula. If you don't, you can certainly look it up on the interwebs, that's no problem, or you can go to my channel, which is where you're watching this from now, I'm presuming, and go and watch the playlist on where stuff comes from, where I talk at length about intervals. That'll help you out. So D to E is always a whole tone away. So I don't have to adjust the E because I needed a whole tone according to the formula. E to some kind of F has to be a whole tone away. To quicken things up a bit, it turns out that F happens to be an F sharp because the natural F is always right beside the E note. And it's the same for the notes B and C. Those are the only two pairs where that sort of weird event happens, where they're just semitones apart. All the other notes, by default, are a whole tone apart. So we've gone from E to F sharp. And then I'm going to do another whole tone interval. Again, 2 frets. And it turns out, in order to do that, the note I'm landing on is a G sharp. Oh, so let's just think for a second now. Again, I'm going to reference Jerry's comment. 3 sharps in the key of A, F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp. I don't know that this is how he learned that. Sometimes they're just taught to remember it like remembering multiplication tables. I don't agree with that approach. That's how I was taught. You spew out the right answer, but you don't really understand what's going on. I don't like that kind of learning. I want you to have an understanding of what's going on. Here's what's going on. Let me just finish this. G sharp, semitone away to the final note, and I'm back to an A, a whole octave higher than the one I started on, which is an interval itself, an interval of 8 notes, if you will, apart. Somewhere over the rainbow, which is a tune Jerry and I are working on. If I do that in the key of A, the first 2 sounds you make when you sing that song, somewhere, is the interval of an octave. So I could go, same thing. It's kind of cool when you realize these sorts of things. Okay, here's the sound of what I just did without me talking. Take a listen. Now I'm doing that visually using the interval formula. It's in my mind. You may not know that's what's going on in my mind. This is what I'm trying to help you realize. What are people thinking when they want to play in the key of A? Here's one thing they might be thinking. Tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. They may also see it in terms of fret distances. 2 frets, then another 2 frets, 1 fret, 2 frets, 2 frets, 2 frets, 1 fret. Either way is fine. And then back down, if you will. Sorry. Going backwards is a little harder if you had to name the notes. A, G sharp, F sharp, E, D, C sharp, B, A. There's no magic to this, folks. This is just rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed until you wake up one Saturday morning and you can ream this stuff off no problem. Eventually, your neurons connect up in a new way, and you've learned something new, and it comes out of you much easier than you ever thought possible, and it will. Riding a bike is not an easy task, but you manage to do it. The physics involved are horrendous. The physics involved in simply walking are very complex, but you do it all the time, assumingly. But you never think about it. And the only reason you're not thinking about it is you've done the darn thing so much, you don't have to think about it. It's been wired in. This is what happens with the professional musicians. These things just got wired in because they did it a lot. The truth is they did it a lot more than you did. You can do the same thing. And you'll know you're there when your ability to pull it off requires pretty much no thought on your part. It looks and feels as if it's intuitive to you. It's natural. And it looks easy when other people are looking at you. They go, "Oh, you do that so easily. I can't believe it." Blah, blah. Yeah, well, you know the work you put into it. So here it is again. And eventually, you'll learn to do it from other locations. Same notes, just in different octaves. And again, you can do this from the point of view of seeing fret distances, but you should also go back and go, that's an A, that's a B. Yep, I can see that that's a C sharp because there's C, so that's C sharp. And then C sharp going to D, yep, semitone, got that. D to E, E to F sharp. Oh, yeah, because that's F. So F sharp to G, and then finish it off with an A. Wow, it's not that difficult after all. Okay, so that's the first thing. Whew. You need to know when somebody says, let's play in the key of A, what that means is you need to know the resources of the key of A. The key of A is an A scale that runs from 1A to the next highest one, or the next lower one. You can go in either direction. If you're going lower, you're going to be doing the alphabet backwards. If you're going higher, you're going to do the alphabet forward. So it'll be some kind of A, B, C, D, E, F, G thing. In our case, it will be A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A. And you do it enough and it becomes memorized. That's it. There's no mystery to it. I often say, I wish I had the pixie dust. I could just sprinkle it over you and say, boom, now you know it. Play. But that's not how it works. And most learning doesn't work that way. So whatever it is that got you to where you are now on your guitar is probably not now the information you're going to need to get you even further advanced in your skill set. You need a new perspective on how things work. Hopefully this is one of them. So we've established this. It's a done deal. I always encourage people to make music with that. Sorry. Use whatever tools, resources, techniques you have. Make some music with it. Just don't go up and down it like a scale. Nobody will ever pay you to play a scale. But that's your sandbox. You go into the sandbox and you start building something. Then you can end it with your big A chord. Why can you end it with an A chord, an A major chord? Because aren't you in the key of A major? In case you haven't thought about that before. Okay. All right, that's point one. Point two. We want to get to a point where not only... Oh, let me come up with, before I go into point two, let's come up with a chord progression that we could use in the key of A. That I could, help demonstrate where the licks might go. So maybe, and again, I'm just doing this off the fly. You need to know what chords exist in the key of A. They are A, B minor, C sharp minor, D, E, F sharp minor, G sharp diminished, back to A. Not all of them do you need to use, but again, they get memorized. It's a rehearsed thing. If you rehearsed it daily, for 30 days, religiously, you probably never forget it for the rest of your life. Are you willing to do it? Yes or no? Give me a +1 in the chat box if you are willing to do these kinds of things in order to raise your level of understanding of how the guitar works so that you can pull off some cool licks in between your chords, apparently out of the blue. And it really is out of the blue. If you're willing to put in that kind of effort, 10 or 15 minutes every day for 30 days. Leave me a +1 in the chat box to let me know, yep, I can do that. Doesn't matter how busy my life is. I can find time for that. 10 or minutes. 10 or 15 minutes is all it takes. Often the shorter sessions you spend are more insightful. They stick better because you stay fresh. If you stick on it for half an hour, your brain starts to fatigue and things don't get held very well. Okay. Now this is common. Carolyn just said, okay. I said, what are the chords in the key of A? She said A, D, E, and she's not wrong, but there are 7 chords in the key of A that I just barked out. Those are 3 of them. What are the other 4? Sean, +1. Thanks, brother. What are the other 4? Again, you don't need to know them right now, but I want you to know that A, D, and E are what are considered the primary chords for the key, and that's why so many songs are using the 1, the 4, and the 5. If that didn't make sense to you, what I just said, don't worry. It's just me barking it out because I'm used to talking this way. The A is the 1 chord, the D is the 4 chord, the E is the 5 chord. That's how musicians talk. But what about the 2 chord, and the 3 chord, and the 6 chord, and the 7 chord? Okay, so maybe I'll just use the 3 chords that Carolyn came up with, A, D, and E, as most of us would probably do, having a nice evening in the summer around the campfire. Let's hope that happens this summer and the virus has slowed itself down. So here's my progression. I'll just make something up. Just that. Okay. Hopefully I can remember it. Now, the key is 2 is B minor. Yes, sir, it is. Good for you. It is. Put that B really close to the word min so it doesn't look like B, a 2B min. Put it right up against, make it go B min, like B minor, like it's one word. I'm just picking on you, 6-string player, but that's exactly right. Okay, so there's the chord progression. So let's pretend that maybe on the E chord, what about 1, 4, 5? 1, 4, 5. The A chord, I'm just going to breeze through this, Tony. The A chord is the 1 chord. D is the 4 chord. E is the 5 chord, and then back to 1. Now you might be wondering why. What's all that about? Well, isn't the A note the first note of the scale? And then the 4th note of the scale we just covered, A, B, C sharp, D. That might sound familiar to you. La, 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 whatever that tune was, right? So A and D, and then the 5 chord is the 5th note of the scale. So you're building a chord off of an A note. You're constructing it somehow. You're building another chord, that's the 1 chord. You're building another chord off of D, and you're building another one off of E. That's the relationship between the scale and the chord. Folks, everything comes back to the scale. This is why I put so much time in on this. The scale is the source of all the questions, of all the answers to the questions you ever have about how music works. But that's not the stuff that guitarists tend to get exposed to in their early days, and it's not the stuff they end up getting exposed to in a timely fashion. So years go by and they still don't know how music works. They just know the song goes A, D, E. That's okay. I'm not saying that's bad. But I think we're here because we're kind of interested to figure out, is there more to it? And there is. Music's really, really big. Once you get into it, it's much bigger than you ever thought, which I find very exciting. Okay, so I'm just going to randomly pick that on the E chord when I hit it. During the E chord being played, I can throw a few licks in. Okay, well, how do I do that? Well, let me think now. I do know the A major scale. One of the neat things about music is certain combinations of notes from that scale when played at the same time. And this is through just human experience. As to whether there's some mystical, harmonic thing in the universe that makes it so, I have no clue. Don't ask me those questions. I don't know. All I can tell you is that through the usage of this material, through millions and millions of humans, there are tendencies that seem to keep reoccurring. And one of those tendencies is that if you took the first note of the major scale and played it simultaneously with the third note of the major scale, which is C sharp, and put the C sharp on another string, because you can't play both at the same time on one string, you get this sound. It's actually kind of hinting a little bit at the A chord already. So I'm hitting the third and the second string, A and C sharp, both at the same time. Because I can't do it on one string, obviously, but I can go. You can see how that note sounds like this one on the second string. Same note. Okay, now I go to the B note, and I think, okay, well, what's 3 notes higher than the B note? B, C sharp, D. So if I combine the B with the D and play them together, again, I have to do it on 2 strings. See how nice that sounds? I get this. Then if I go to C sharp and I play 3 notes above it, you always include the notes you're starting with in your count, by the way. So if I'm going to go 3 notes above C sharp, I say C sharp, E, F sharp. I think I got that right. Sorry, E. C sharp, D, E. Don't go C sharp and then go D, E, F sharp. Don't do that. You'll get yourself messed up. So look, this is kind of cool. Now, if you think about it for a second, what's happening on the second string is that I'm actually still playing the scale of A major on it, because I'm using the tools from the A major scale. It doesn't matter what string I do them on. I'm using the same material But in this case, I'm starting with the note C sharp. C sharp is in the key of A. And I go C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp. It doesn't sound like the major scale. That's because I'm not starting on A. I'm starting on a different note. That's all you need to think about. But I am using the exact same notes. Here's the result of that. And perhaps we would need to go into this a little bit more in depth for you to get a good handle on it. Or maybe, if you're really into this stuff, I would be happy to put a little mini course together and, charge you a couple of $1,000 or something for it. No, I'm just kidding. How about $27? That would work. I could put a mini course together and really dig into that to help you get a good handle on it. Here's what that sounds like if you did it to every note on the A major scale. I think you'll find it quite pleasing. These are things you hear in music every day. Okay, so clearly, if you want to make licks that play two or more notes together, that's what we mean by harmonizing your licks. You're not just playing single notes. You need to understand, number one, the key that you're in. Number two, that from that key, you need to be able to know the major scale that relates to that particular key. And then from there, you need to know how you can combine the notes of the scale in interesting, creative ways to make pleasant sounds, like things like this. And you've heard that. There it is there. Right? Brown-Eyed Girl. That's that opening riff. Where do you think they got that from? They don't do it in A, they do it in D. But it's the same principle. And sometimes when you sit in your sandbox and you explore this stuff, you'll play things like that and you'll go, oh, that reminds me of another song I heard before. That's really cool. Pay attention to when that happens. That means the universe is connecting positively with your craft. Yeah, sounds hokey, but it's real. Okay? So, I've got this. Sorry. I can do that. Why not? So now I've got resources available to me to put licks in place. I'll do that again. I stayed too long on the E chord, and that threw off my timing of the lick. Timing and where you place the lick is important, but I don't want to go into it right away. Let me try that again, and I'll try to pay more attention, not stare out the window. You know, something as simple as that is remarkable. All of a sudden, you have an extra layer of skill that wasn't just shown to you by pictures and dots. Just do this, man. Grab your fingers and make this thing happen. You know, you could use any combination of the notes on those two strings, but because I'm in this region of the fretboard, I don't want to go really far away from where I am and then come back to that chord in this example. I want to stay close because I only have a short period of time to squeeze the lick in, if that makes sense. So I'm just grabbing. I don't have to start there. I can start anywhere. Sorry. Just depends on how much time is available to you to squeeze it in before you know you need to be on the next chord. But that's a timing issue, and I know Tony is very interested in that topic. That's something I'd like to put together before this series is all done, for sure. Okay. So that's one perspective, is combining two strings together that basically, the terminology is you've harmonized the A major scale. Here's the scale on a single sound. Here it is harmonized. The first time I ever heard that just blew my socks off. That sound could come out of just this series of notes in some cool combination. Okay, that's the first perspective that I want you to be aware of. Actually, I covered the A major scale. That was the first perspective. The harmonizing of it on the next string was the second perspective. The third perspective is the combining of them. So I have covered three perspectives so far. All right, we're doing pretty good. How's my time? Okay, and I'll briefly do it in the key of F too, just so you can see how the same process applies. Now, more commonly, thanks, Tony. More commonly, I think guitarists don't get exposed to the major scale right away because they argue that the sounds they hear in the music they play isn't that sound. And there's a simpler scale that they can get access to that allows them to play, how shall we say, quicker and sound equally good quicker without as much boom boom on the brain. And it's because the scale is smaller and it's almost guaranteeing you that you're going to sound good if you use it. So I think you know what I'm talking about here. The A major pentatonic. Sorry. You may not be familiar with it, but if you look at my hand as I'm about to play, you are familiar with this shape. That's F sharp minor. That's an F sharp note right there. Don't rack your brain over that. Just know that you know the shape. For the most of you do. Don't worry, Todd. When you come in and you become a permanent student of mine, we will fill in all the gaps for $10,000. Okay? That shape is the thing that most guitarists get exposed to right away, and they tend to get exposed to it not there, but here at the 5th fret, which is called A minor pentatonic. Tony, is that in thirds? What specifically? Refresh my brain. This is all thirds. That stuff. Just refresh my brain, what you're referring to. Okay, where was I? Yes. So you're familiar with this. But you're familiar with it as being A minor pentatonic. Simultaneously, again, don't overthink this, it is also, if you started on this note, which is C, instead of that note, which is A, and play exactly the same shape, is called C major pentatonic. So when you play any one of these pentatonic shapes that you may currently know, you're actually playing two different versions, major and minor. Major and minor. You may not be familiar with the relationship between those two. Let's leave that aside for the moment. All I'm going to tell you is, if you're used to this shape, you can use it, obviously, to create some licks and then learn to harmonize it. But we're not going to do it there. We're going to do it at the 2nd fret off of F sharp. That's because the relationship between the A, which is here, and the F sharp, which is here, is the same kind of relationship that exists between the C that's here and the A that's there. Now, if that messed up your brain, don't dwell on it. But they're identical. The same math, the same chemistry is going on. It's just like I made a lemon pie in Nova Scotia, and I'm going to make, this is Nova Scotia, and I'm going to make a lemon pie in British Columbia. Why not? Where Sean is. Okay? It's the same pie. It's a lemon pie. The relationship is identical. I've just done it in different provinces. That's one way to look at it. So here we are. Same shape. But don't focus on it as being F sharp minor pentatonic. Focus on it as being A major pentatonic. It does help. It almost has a happier sound to it when you focus on this guy than on this guy. Anyway, those things are a bit of the side. The point here is that once you have this shape, if you look at it and see it from the point of view of shape, which I think many of you would, you could play any combination of notes from it. It's consecutive strings. So for example, if we come back to my chord progression, now this is what's in my brain right now. So those were notes coming from A major pentatonic or F sharp minor pentatonic. But I could also harmonize things. I could go. And it has a different sound than the major scale did. Okay, and it would be good for you, if you can, to take that thing and then go and say to yourself, okay, that's an A, and that's a B, and that's a C sharp, and a D. Oh, I'm not doing major, sorry, excuse me, not major scale. A, B, C sharp, E, F sharp, A. Those are the notes of A major pentatonic. If I do the same thing starting on F sharp, I know this might be a bit confusing the way I'm talking right now. I'll give you the big picture in 1 second. So F sharp, A, B, C sharp, E, F sharp. And I've done the 5 notes. That's why it's called penta. Penta means 5. 5 notes until you go from one F sharp to the other F sharp. So it's a very small scale, and then you just repeat it if you know it. Okay? So you can do that, and you can mess around with that as a possibility. You have to go into the sandbox to do this. I know this is a lot of material. If you want the charts for these particular keys, I will do that for you. But be aware that I find in general, I know we're running out of time here, be aware that people can get too dependent on visually looking at charts to guide what they're going to do. It's a good thing to do because it's the first step to kind of get familiar with something. But the goal is to get the chart out of your way and have it floating in here. So the sooner you get the chart out of the way, the better off you're going to be. That's why I don't have the charts for today, because they're essentially identical, really. I'll hold that up for you if you can see it. They're identical to the ones that I did for the key of C. In their essence, they are. They're not the same notes, that can be a bit confusing, but it's It's the same chemistry that's going on. So the sooner you can get yourself off of staring at charts and letting that guide, you've got to get it into your brain, into your bones. And that's what happens with the repetition and the work. I hate to use the word work. I guess it's, you got to play. You got to sit down and play a lot without stuff that's in front of you, right? It's got to come from you, from inside here and then out, which, by the way, is how music started. Nobody started with a written out anything. They had something they could do sound on, and they figured, oh, what if I do this? And then go here. Oh, that's neat. Oh, then I could go, what could I do? Ooh, that sounds scary. Jaws, of course, right? You have to go into that sandbox and make that process an equally important part of what you're calling practice. Yeah, you can look at musical charts all you want. There's more than enough to go around. But what's missing, in my opinion, is holding that bigger piece of information in your mind that allows you to make the music up that could eventually be put on a chart for somebody else to play. That's kind of cool when you think about it that way. You're just as capable of doing what anybody else did. If they're higher level, it's just because they've been at it longer and their life has been structured such that they can commit a whole ton of time to it. Are there geniuses there? Sure, there's geniuses in everything. So we can't worry about them. They don't need this. They're the minority. You know this. So why are we focusing on them? Let's focus on the usual average person who wants to excel at a skill. That's where we're at. Okay. What else can I do? Let's do I wanted to show you one other perspective from the major scale that I think you might find interesting. When I started the harmonization of A major, I played the A and then I played the note 3 notes higher, which is C sharp. And I did that same process for each and every note of the A major scale. So the higher note of the two, the higher in pitch, was on the second string. If I take that second string C sharp note that I played with the A note, a lot of talking going on here, and I drop it down an octave onto the 5th string, the next lower C sharp. And if you're not familiar with where these notes are, again, go to my channel, get the playlist called Where Stuff Comes From, where we go over helping you learn where these notes are located. This is the stuff that helps you understand how people do what you want to be able to do. It's a mixture of shape and sound and this, but there's been more emphasis put on shape and sound, which is very good. But this stuff is missing, or people are choosing to ignore it because somewhere along the line they've got this vague notion that knowing it doesn't make you better at music. Nothing could be further from the truth. If you say that to me in studio, I'll say, so what's your tale? I'm going to pick on Joanna if she's still here right now. She's a trained psychologist. So what I'm going to say to her is, what you're saying to me is that the less you know about psychology, the better you are as a counselor of it. Well, that doesn't make any sense. The less I know about music, which is essentially what you're saying when you don't want to work on this kind of stuff, essentially knowing your fretboard in terms of note layout and such, you're telling me that the less you know about music, the better you are at it. And there is a notion out there that exists that somehow some people just come onto the planet wired up to play music out of nowhere. It doesn't exist. They've been influenced somehow, somewhere along their growth path, and they've managed to put some focused time on those influences to make come to life what they're probably, yes, naturally wired for. But if those influences were not there and they didn't know how to piece things together, they may still get at it, but it would take them much, much longer. So we have to get rid of the notion that there's this magical group of people that are just born to be musicians. Nobody's born specifically to do anything. They have a wiring that allows them to quicken the process, shall we say. Some people are good at art, some aren't. Some people are good at mechanical things, some aren't. Some people are good at working with children, some aren't. Some people are good at growing really good trees, some aren't. Some are good at chopping trees down, some aren't. That's true everywhere. So we just have to bypass that. Okay, what I want to get to here is if I drop that C sharp down to the lower C sharp and still keep the original A, that's a very pretty sound. These are called sixths, not thirds. These were thirds. Sixths. There's no mystery here. What's the difference from C sharp to A? C, just do the alphabet. C, D, E, F, G, A. From the lower note to the higher note, 6 letters apart, we call them sixths. Sixths. Okay? So we've got something like this. We've got this. Isn't that beautiful? I love that sound. So you could do this. D. Mess my mind up. Sorry. Cool. Joanna says, not true. What do you mean? What's not true? Did I say something not true? Is that what you're telling me? Am I actually wrong? Okay. Now, let's just quickly go through the same process in the key of F. By the way, you can see, I took a whole hour plus talking my way through this and giving you the information. You need to go into the sandbox when you get off here or you wake up tomorrow morning, and you've got to play around with some of these ideas. The first idea will always be, hey, pick a key that you want to explore, apply the major scale interval formula. You need to do that, and then play out the scale. Make up a chord progression in that key, a very simple one. Maybe just use the 1, 4, and 5 chords, as billions upon billions of songs are based on. And then start messing around with creating a melody out of the 1-string scale of whatever key you chose, and then mix that into your chords. Even if it doesn't sound rhythmically on or technically correct, there is nothing lost in the process. You are exploring, and exploration by nature means I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if I'm going to come out of this alive. There's a risk to it, but we can manage the risk because this is just guitar. It's not a major thing. So you've got to do that. And then you've got to take the extra leap and figure out how you could still play the same notes of the scale on another string with the notes that you just played on the original string for the key you chose, and then blend them together. You don't have to do the whole thing. You just have to take whatever time it takes to get maybe 1, 2, or 3 combinations of those notes together. And that could it might take you 45 minutes to figure that out. There's nothing wrong with that. You said you don't have to learn to be... No, I didn't. I never said that. I did not say you don't have to learn to be a psychologist to be a psychologist. What I said was, this is important, what I said was, the less I know about psychology, this is what somebody might claim, as a psychologist, you as a psychologist, let's say you're out there, you might be thinking, the less I know about that field, the better psychologist I am. That's very different from what you just said. And it's the same thing in music. People say it all the time. Oh, I'm a free spirit. I just play what I feel. Yes, and there's definitely a place for this. But there's a craft to it as well. And the craft has a history of how music is structured. And there's this is a guitarist thing. There's a lot of guitarists who ignore that history in favor of just being a free spirit. I can't change your brain about it, but I can tell you you're missing some vital information about how music works in order for that free spirit tendency to come out even more. But you're not letting it happen because you think learning this stuff, the stuff I'm talking about to you today, is, people use the word theory. I don't. I don't call it that. I often call it analysis, or I call it musical language. There's no theory going on in terms of a scientific approach. Okay. In any event, I know this stuff is a bit tricky on the front end. Let's do the key of F real quick. I'm not going to do the whole thing. I'm just going to... And I said not true. I'm not sure what you're saying there, Joanna. And I said not true. We'll have to chat more about it. What are the notes in the key of F? Click, click, click. Apply the interval formula. Tone, tone, semitone. Tone, 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 semitone. Find an F note. I'm going to find it on the 4th string here. Apply the interval. Tone, tone, semitone. Tone, 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 semitone. Now, it does take me rather high up the fretboard, and on an acoustic guitar, that could be a little gnarly, getting yourself around there. But at least in principle, you understand what's going on. Then I go back and I say, okay, well, what are the notes? Well, that's an F. Got a watery eye again. That's an F. And if you know that, well, you should know it. So then it was followed by a G. This is your brain having to work at this now. G followed by an A. Then I need that semitone. That's A. The semitone makes a B flat, because here's B right next to it. I don't want that. I want this. That's a B flat. Okay. B flat goes a tone higher to C. C goes a tone higher to D. D goes a tone higher to E. And then E to F is a natural semitone, resolves the whole thing. Here's what it sounds like without me talking about it. It's always good to go backwards. And then, if it's in the key of F, add an F chord at the end. What are the 1, 4, and 5 chords in the key of F? Well, there's F. So there's F. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a B flat note, so there's a B flat chord. And you could just play it, if you were used to playing an A, you could just stay on those 3 strings and move it up one fret, and that's a B flat. But those are the only 3 strings you can hit. That's why people fill it out that way, or they fill it out like a bar chord, or even an inversion of B. They do that so they have a more beautiful sounding chord. So, you know, there's F, there's B flat, and what's the 5? It's F, G, A, B. It's a C, so we need a C chord. So I could go F, F, B flat. Sorry, I don't want that sound. B flat. I could move that up to C. Back to F. Now I've got to set that up so I could throw a lick in there. So let's try this. The single string lick. Again, I'm trying to stay close to where I am. So I just grabbed the first 3 notes of that scale, threw it in, and came back. So let's take those first 3 notes and let's harmonize them. Let's go on to the 3rd string and ask yourself, if that's F, thirds are good sounding intervals. I told you that. They sound really pretty. So let's find them. F, G, A. These are notes from the scale. That's why the scale is so important. So find an A on the next higher string. Here's one right there on the 3rd string. The F note wants to go to G if you're going up the scale, and the A note wants to go to B. B flat. And then the G wants to go to A, and the B flat wants to go to C. I'm talking that real fast, I know, but you got to go in your sandbox and play that. I know the F has 1 flat. Yep, that's good. But do you know why? Tony is saying he knows it has one flat. Lots of people know it. They just wrote. They can learn these things by rote, but they don't always necessarily understand where it came from. Nobody just woke up one Tuesday morning and said, I'm going to invent the key of F, and behold, it shall have one B flat in it. That never happened, nor will it ever happen. It happened for a reason. The reason is there's a template for the sound of a major scale. And when you apply that template starting on C, that's the only key where every note you're going to create automatically creates the sound of a major scale. If you apply the template on any other note, let's take E, then all the other notes after E, not all of them, some of them are going to get altered. In this case, they're going to have some sharp notes in there in order for that template to still be true. That's the reason why there are 4 sharps in the key of E. Not that there are 4 sharps in the key of E. So I want you to be aware of that. So where was I here? Oh, I've lost my train of thought. What was I doing, folks? I'm still doing F. Oh, yeah, I'm harmonizing. So here it is. Nice. Now, part of what I just did there is a mixture of following the F major scale, and I've practiced these things so much because I had a very tall first teacher when I was taking guitar lessons, and I was very scared of him. So I did what he told me to do. So we did this stuff. Did that wrong, but we did that stuff a lot. That was a big part of playing guitar. I didn't much enjoy it, but I saw the value of it right away, and I used it right away, and I've been using it ever since. So there's a mixture for me of looking down at that and seeing the notes of F go by, but also just in the muscle memory of how these thirds unfold. There's combinations of how the fingers work that your hand and your brain have gotten used to, and you can pull out these patterns really fast without knowing the actual notes. That's the beauty of having done it for a long time. Okay, so that's in the key of F. So what could you do? You could play your progression now. Something like that, you see? So you plan it ahead. You're seeing this is a tool I have available to myself to be able to play in the key of F. You could also think, do I know F major pentatonic? You might not, but I'll bet you know D minor pentatonic. Well, okay, let's figure that out. Here's A. Here's a D. You may or may not. I'm not sure. It would require that you have some knowledge of the 5 minor pentatonic shapes that are useful to have across the fretboard. But this is where so much of what we're talking about now can depend on stuff you've either had access to or not had access to, which I don't know from each of you. So every time I move a little forward, my brain goes, wait, don't tell them that because you need to know if they know this first. And if they don't, then what I'm about to say may not make sense. But just pretend for a moment that you didn't know F major pentatonic, but you did know D minor pentatonic. For the same reasons I talked about, that weird lemon pie relationship I showed you earlier. So it's the same idea going on here. That's an F. Go down to where the D is on the 5th string, and I can play D minor pentatonic. I know it's not a satisfying answer right now, but I can use that resource to do the same thing. Something like that. You see what's happening. Sky's the limit. None of this is going to work unless you go into your sandbox and play with it. Yeah, Tony says, because you can't have a sharp, so it's B. You can't have A sharp, so it's B flat. That's right. That's right. Remember, when you're naming scales, you have to boxes. I hate the word boxes. I'll tell you in a second. Actually, I'm going to use that as a question. We're going to do a Q&A right now because we're running out of time. By the way, let me know overall how the overall stream was this time. Was there any choppiness at your end? Did the audio go okay? Did the video go okay? Because I see a delay on my screen, so I can't tell. But just let me know. Yes, when it comes to scales, almost all the time, there are a few exceptions, you cannot have two letter names of the same letter consecutively in a row. You can't go A sharp, and then something, and then C. You have to go A, B flat, C. So you're following out the ladder, if you will, of the. Sorry, I was looking at the chat, not at the camera. The ladder of the scale. That's what scale means. It's I think there's a like scala, right? It comes from ladder. So you're going A, B, C, D, E. Yeah, you can't have. You have to have them all consecutively that way. Claude says, okay. Sean, 10 times 10 audio. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for that because we've had terrible problems with it. Okay. I'm going to address the box thing. No hiccups. Thanks, Tony. The box, I just don't like the phrase. Now it's not because it's a box. Your session was dialed in per, thanks, brother. It's because people get hooked on the box. Right? I know this is a little off topic, but, well, it's related, but it's off topic for our topic today. Like, here's one box for A minor pentatonic. You already know this. Here's another one. Here's another one. Sorry. Where am I here? Here's another one. Here's another. Here's another. Now I'm repeating. I'm playing the whole thing now just an octave higher. So nothing weird has happened as I go higher. I did 5 patterns kind of here, and then they start to repeat for as much fretboard room as you have. Okay, so that in and of itself takes a lot of time for people to learn, and it's useful to know all 5 of those so-called box patterns. But what nobody seems to be telling anybody is they were never designed for you just to memorize them. Because the next question that people get or have is, I get stuck in the box all the time. I don't know how to get out of it, so I'm playing in one, and then maybe I slip into another. And so they're seeing the fretboard as those boxes, which in and of itself is a valuable tool. But the purpose for those boxes was to chop the fretboard up into manageable learning areas. The goal was to then start linking those so-called boxes together so that your brain doesn't see 5 boxes. It sees one fretboard with all of those possibilities melting into one another. And students don't do that very much. You should ultimately be able just to, if you know the notes of your A minor pentatonic, let's say, you should be able to go. Now, I'm not relying on box patterns to do that. I know the notes that make up the scale, so I find the notes as I need them. That's the goal. So if you can, man, try to start working your way from thinking about the boxes. You do need to think about them until you don't, is what I'm saying. Okay. How about we give ourselves 10 or 15 minutes? I understand if you need to leave. I've taken up a lot of your time right now. But I'd sit here all night and chat with you guys. I would have no problem doing that. bit like it is the cage system. That's what I'm talking about. I just don't like to use the term because I don't want to confuse people. But that's it. You got it. It's okay, Kevin's got to go. GTG. He's into these, I don't know what you call acronyms, I suppose. Anyway, yep, no problem, Kevin. Any questions so far? Now, I'm going to put this out here for you while you're typing in a question or something. If you are finding this material valuable and interesting, but certainly in this context, it has moved too quickly, and you haven't had the opportunity to kind of assimilate it very well, then why don't you send me an email or a private message on Facebook, and we could take some time together to help give you a more one-on-one training with it. You know, I'd be happy to sit with any of you for half an hour and just really zero in on getting really good at one aspect of all these different perspectives. You do not have to have all of them in your head. And there are many more. There's lots of ways you can harmonize your licks. Those are just a few. But it would be really a good idea to pick one and just zero in and get so good at using that tool before you move on to another tool. And so if you're interested, I would be willing to do that to help make sure you're getting some strong value from this, because otherwise you might leave this session going, oh man, interesting, yeah, but way over my head. I didn't really walk away with anything valuable. I don't really want you to feel that way. So feel free if you want to, for those that are attending live, to PM me in Facebook, give me a private message, or email me, Stephen@DempsterGuitarStudio.com. And we can do that. Sean's got to go. I think it looks like this has been very informative. Looks like something. Yeah, we all got to spend time in the sandbox. It's probably something you know you needed to do, but you're just avoiding it. Maybe, I don't know. A lot of people avoid it just to sit down and do the nitty gritty of stuff. Could you run down playing sixth again in the key of A? Sure. If you recall, in the key of A, the upper note that I was playing, the upper notes, I should say, were also following the notes of A major, but they started on the note C sharp. Make sure that what I just said to you is clear in your mind before I go on, which I can't tell right away, but make sure that is. So what happened is, every note that I played on the second string, as I went up the A major scale, all I did is I kept the A major string the same, and I took the C sharp, which was the higher note. I'm looking at the chat. I should be looking at the camera. And I dropped it down an octave. Now, let's be clear on what I mean by that. This is a C sharp. Okay? Here's an octave lower. Now, you may not be aware of that idea. Again, this hints at the cage system as well. Okay? But let me take this note here, and I'll demonstrate why this is an octave higher. Watch this. Sorry. So I started here, and I ended there. So that's, and it's a C sharp major scale. I'm not playing A major. Don't get confused right now. Or I could have done this. That's the same note on another string. The point there is that these two notes are the same name, but they're an octave apart. Again, everybody's got their little holes of understanding, and I get that. It's like Swiss cheese. It's all over the place. So I don't know to what extent you're comfortable with that, but the notion is I'm taking this note and dropping it down an octave, but I keep the A where it was. And now everything moves accordingly. A moves to B, and the C sharp note moves to D, as it would in the A major scale. I may have lost you already. So I've got this. It's a nice sound. It's rich. Okay. So the A note wants to go to B, and then the B wants to go to C sharp, because those are the notes in the key of A sharp, or in the key of A. On the fifth string, the C sharp, I'm still thinking key of A, wants to go to D, right? Or to D right next door, and the D wants to go to E, and then the E will go to F sharp, and the F sharp will go to G sharp, etc. And so what you end up with is this. Sorry. That's what's happening. It's like all the notes in a scale are all part of a family and they're all working happily together. They all sound nice together. Let me do that again because I mucked that up for you. And then back down. I hope that makes sense, Sean. I think it was Sean that. No, could you run down? No, that was six string player. I hope that makes sense. Six string. Tony says, yes. Who's that chap on your right shoulder? Are you talking about this guy? That's my bobblehead. That's me. That's why I put it there. See if somebody notices it. You get the virtual Tootsie Roll, Tony. I'm going to send you a virtual Tootsie Roll. My wife had that made up for me a few years ago. That's my bobblehead doll. Let's see. Claude, wish I could stay longer. Thanks. Going to check out your Rhythm OS core. Please do, man. And send me any questions you have if you read through it. If you need some clarity on stuff, by all means do that. I'd be happy to answer those questions for you. And as you may know, it's on. It's being offered up at a crazy low price while we're in this crazy situation. I figure if people's finances are all nuts right now, my small part is to really reduce the price and make it accessible to people. So if you can use it, for sure. Extra sand. Yeah. Okay, man. I don't mean to put extra sand in your sandbox, but we got to do this. This is that level of your guitar playing that often doesn't get talked about, where you've got to sit, not for long periods of time, and just mentally organize your thinking and understanding of things without just always playing what you know, because that's not progressing you forward. I hate to tell you that. If you already know how to play something really well, done. Now, you can say to yourself, well, you can always refine it. Sure, you can always refine it, but you already know how to play it. But maybe you don't understand why it works the way it does, and maybe you want to write songs, and maybe you want to make your own album. Well, things just don't get randomly put together when you're making anything. There's a system to it, and you don't have to live by the system strictly, but it can guide the process. Todd, one grain at a time. Yeah, that's a good analogy. Then our sandbox. Well, the goal isn't to fill your sandbox, folks. It doesn't matter how much sand is in it. The goal is to push the sand around in creative, intriguing, investigative ways that are unique to only you. The way I push my sand around is different than the way you push your sand around. I'm looking for you to cultivate a bit of your own voice in your playing so that your understanding of guitar is not just playing other people's stuff, which is there's nothing wrong with it. But a lot of people just stop there. They don't want to go into that netherworld of how to write anything or make sense of how this fretboard works so that they don't get so intimidated by it. That's what we're talking about. John, what's the rhythm course? What is the Rhythm OS course? Good for beginners. Yep, it's designed primarily for people who have played for a little while, but their observation in their playing is that all their strumming starts to sound the same because they're strumming from a point of view of here's the pattern or patterns, maybe two or three, that I know and I'm comfortable with in my strumming hand, and I just peel and stick them onto every song that I play. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work. So the course is an argument about getting people out of that headspace and getting them to think a little more deeply about how rhythm works. You do not need to read music, but you do need to pay attention to the fact that rhythm does not come from a guitar. The fact that you have chords and you have a pick doesn't mean you have rhythm. Rhythm comes from inside you first, and it gets expressed through the instrument. And my goal in the course is to help you get experience with the feel of rhythm first. And we go through a lot of training in doing that. There's over it's close to 5 hours of video training with me going through ways to think about rhythm such that near the end of the course, we get to apply your knowledge to 3 original tunes. You get to listen to them, and using me as the sounding board, we're going through the process that I describe in the course of figuring out how you could create your own strumming solution to that song based on what you're hearing in the song, not based on the fact that pattern number whatever that Uncle Dave showed me 15 years ago, I'm still playing that on just about every song I play. That's what we're trying to get away from. I call those canned strum patterns. So that's what the course is all about. It's a big course. It's a big course. And so, yeah. But it's I'm biased. It's a good one. It's a one of its kind. So I would go check it out. And likewise, Sean, if you have questions on it, email me. Let me answer them for you so you're clear on what it is that's there. And if it fits your need, great. Happy to get it to you. And again, folks, it's regularly $297. I'm selling it this week for $47. Come on. Now, you don't get the bonuses that are normally associated with it. But that doesn't mean that down the road as you go through, you can still stay in touch with me as the course unfolds, which is very valuable in and of itself. But, the traditional bonuses that you'll see listed in its sales page, those you don't get access to. That's just too much work. I will do it for $297, but I won't do it for $47. It's a lot of work. Tony, thanks, Stephen. See you tomorrow with my bucket and spade. Listen, folks, looks like Sean, awesome. Thanks. We'll check it out later today. Looks like great. We've wound down. I took you a little longer than I expected. I figured 6:30 would do it. What is the time now? 6:40. Not bad. 10 minutes over. I'm glad that the stream worked well. And trust me when I say I know what we covered the first day and today is really just the tip of the iceberg. But it's a starting point. And even then, not everything I talked about in either day you need to be good at. For example, in that first day, if you grab your charts, which you can get on the channel underneath the video, you just take one of those ideas and you get really, really good at them. You spend as much time as you feel you need to. Your mind will tell you it's time to move on. Don't let boredom is a good clue. A lot of people use boredom as a clue to move on, but that doesn't mean you've sufficiently mastered the material. It could be an illusion. So I wouldn't rely on that sensation alone. The sensation you're looking for is one of, can you imagine in a pinch if somebody said, let's jam in the key of C, that there's absolutely nothing about the key of C that you have to deeply think about in order to jam something in the key of C? That you could play that scale wherever you wanted or up and down one string effortlessly without too much thought. That's more what you're looking for. Don't use boredom as your reference to move on. Use a sense of, I've got this mastered as a key to move on. All right. Already got the course. Oh, well. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Mike. Yeah, already have the course. Well worth it. Thanks again. Thanks for that, Mike. I appreciate it. Okay, guys, I guess that's it. Let's wrap it up. I'm going to be doing this again tomorrow. Then I'll probably take the weekend off and we'll do a few more in the upcoming week. I would really appreciate your feedback as to what you'd like me to cover. I know Tony has mentioned timing, and I assume that references rhythm as well. So that might be something I can look into for sure. Yeah, let me know because I can't read minds. Listen, folks, thanks so much for taking the time today, to hang out with me. I enjoy doing this a lot. I hope I didn't overwhelm you too much with all the talk about it, but I really am interested to make sure you're clear on the important concepts at least. And stay healthy and well, and hope to see you again tomorrow and then back into the new week following that. So let's just keep having some fun. This is all just raw. I'm loving it. I hope you are too. I'll see you again. Bye, guys.